So the astrology of the week of 3 January 2022 through 9 January 2022, it's a week that sees this newfound Jupiter and Pisces energy come under a little bit of pressure in a way, with just a lot of activity with Mars and Sagittarius overcoming Jupiter and Pisces. But Jupiter this week meets the south bending of the nodes, and it provides a kind of wonky energy with this new expansive Jupiter phase. And so it's a week of maybe overdoing things or warnings about just how Jupiter and Pisces may be for you. It's good that we end the week with Venus in the heart of the Sun, completing that purification process, or its most intensive phase of the Venus retrograde and that purification process this week, late in the week. Let's get busy. Let's look at the aspects this week and dive into the astrology. My name is S.J. Anderson. I'm glad you're here. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my weekly astrology video. I just look at the astrology of the week in this video. I break it down. And it's my great pleasure and joy. We're here in 2022, the first full week of astrology in 2022. And we're settling into what these themes are going to be about, what Jupiter and Pisces is going to be about. Jupiter is not going back to Aquarius, thank the heavens. You know, we don't have to contend with this upheaval phase of Jupiter and Saturn's co-presence. And so we're getting to grow into some newness. I don't know about you, I felt new energy, new vibes, just new kind of openings energetically coming in after last week. And I'm very, very grateful, excited, the unknown. You know, there's always an unknown component, and you know, fear can be a response. I think fear can be a healthy response, at least a sense of trepidation. It's how we respond to it. You know, these are what a lot of great teachers talk about. Everybody's afraid. It's some of us ideally will respond to fear and act anyway, and so that's just sort of how I'm trying to focus on 2022, moving into it one day at a time. We have this Capricorn moon that we just had, the Capricorn new moon. I tweeted yesterday about one day at a time builds a year. And so there's this kind of workmanlike quality that I think Saturn and Capricorn can bring to a mentality. And it's good, just healthy in terms of this stepping into the unknown, stepping into fear. You know, Jupiter in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. It's very much a transit where you have this co-presence for this first 5 months of 2022 of Jupiter and Neptune climaxing there in April, when they'll conjoin in April. There is the unknown might be accentuated with the energies of Neptune and Jupiter, and Pisces is a sign of the unknown. It's going to be a big theme of the talk of this week. Just the nature of the Piscean and how that can bring unknown and even turmoil. So the other thing I wanted to say in this introduction, yes, we're getting into this new phase and we're deepening into it for 2022. But you know, there was some pushback I saw on Twitter, folks, you know, maybe having problems this last week, and Jupiter comes into Pisces. This happens every time Jupiter gets strong. And astrologers get excited about Jupiter being strong. People say, well, hey, look at this thing happened in my life. You know, you lied to us or you misled us. And I want to speak a little bit about that here, because it's just the wrong approach, in my view, to think about astrology, a top-down version of the cosmos, where the astrology, one astrological symbol will define everything. And it's unequivocal and guaranteed. Just not how astrology works. Astrology is a symbolic map, and that symbolic map interfaces with reality. I argue that reality, the facts on the ground, are more important than the symbolic map. You know, the job is sometimes to understand the facts on the ground as they assert themselves by using the symbolic map to interject some understanding and awareness to what's happening, but ultimately the facts on the ground triumph. And that's why in readings a lot, I'll tell people, let's throw this out for a second. You know, someone comes to me and says, well, I'm looking for a new job. What does the astrology say? I say, let's just throw the astrology out for a quick second. Tell me about the facts on the ground. Have you applied to jobs? Are you in a job? Do you have leads? And often it'll be something very clear, like, oh yeah, I've applied to these 2 jobs, I'm deep in the interview process. So then when we look at the symbolic map, it actually informs those facts on the ground. And So this last week, when things were happening, people are in crisis, horrible things in the world are always happening. And we would have to then read the symbolic map against, to inform that. But it's not like astrology lied. It's just, the astrology is, the map is. Our job as astrologers is to kind of interpret it and share ideas about it, but it never triumphs the facts on the ground. And so I just want to be clear about that. You know, when you listen to videos, my videos or other astrologers' videos, you know, there's got to be a kind of a core centeredness that one arrives at astrology from to, I think, use it as in its most robust form. And we'll see this week. I mean, the thing is, Saturn is still highly strong in the sky. Saturn is a malefic planet. It's in Aquarius. There is going to be new kind of formulations and the installing of new Saturnine restriction. That's just what Saturn does. Coldness. Saturn can be a destructive energy. You got Mars in Sagittarius right now, where you have the fire planet Mars with the fire sign. That can be a lot of fire, and it's squaring Jupiter. That's going to be a big theme of this video. So there's a lot here. It's not just Jupiter and Pisces, you know, and nothing bad happens, and no one dies, and we just live with cherries and rainbows and ice cream. It's just not how it works. And I think, so, you know, the last thing I'll say here is that as astrologers get excited about Jupiter and Pisces for a number of reasons, it's not that it means facts that the first noble truth of Buddhism, that life is suffering, or the Christian model of, you know, the original sin, and this is a realm of original sin, something like that. I'm not as familiar with the Christian models. It's been a long time since I've studied those, but I think there's an idea that we've fallen, and that then there's this kind of way back to heaven or something like this. Maybe the esoteric Christian models are more, you know, that we have a divinity in us and we're kind of quickening our spirit through spiritual practice, something like this. But the noble truth, life is suffering, astrology will not eliminate that. Jupiter in Pisces is not going to stop that noble truth. In fact, it might even engage us more directly with suffering as a way to enlighten us. You know, that's what happened to the Buddha, sitting under the Bo tree. You know, there with what is it, Mara? I think was the devil character in that story, and Mara comes, and there's this kind of great crisis moment with Buddha and Mara that produces the wisdom and the enlightenment, and that might be more accurate to think about Jupiter and Pisces as the producer of enlightenment through challenge and difficulty. And the gift of pain, the gift of suffering. So I don't want to go off too much here. I know I've just gone into this. It's a philosophical problem and a philosophical conversation. One video, a couple tweets isn't going to solve it. These are books that need to be written on this topic. The problem of why do bad things happen to good people? You hear that a lot. It's the same philosophical problem. So one last quick thing. We get excited about Jupiter and Pisces because of there's rules in the astrological systems, particularly certain schools of astrology, electional astrology, all kinds of rituals that rely on astrology, where when you have Jupiter and Pisces, it opens things up in terms of those rules as well. And so astrologers are excited for a lot of different reasons, but really none of them is that the first noble truth or that suffering goes away. So let me come back. So that's kind of an introduction here, and it feeds right into this week. Let's start now and look at what's going on with these planets this week. It's kind of a quiet week, and I'm glad it's a quiet week because it's important. What I just went into is very important to understand, and I think it's a great week to let us pause and maybe address some of these philosophical problems. It's very Jupiter, right? Jupiter signifies philosophy and higher thought, and Pisces is a sign ruled by Jupiter. Now that Jupiter is there, it's a perfect time for this kind of conversation. But all we get this week, right out of the gate, 12:30, here in Central Europe, on Monday, right out of the gate, the Jupiter will perfect a square to the lunar nodes at the south bending. So the south bending is the point when the moon is at the south bending, it's the lowest below the ecliptic. And that's why we call it the south bending. It's the place where it bends, the path of the moon bends and starts coming back up. And then the moon will meet the north node or the ascending node as it ascends above the ecliptic or the path of the sun. So Jupiter's at the south bending. Astrologers say this may take on the nature of the south node. And this happens right out of the gate this week. It's something that was relevant, you know, every week I try to cover what I can. I could have talked about this, that as soon as Jupiter came into Pisces, what did it have to contend with? The south bending, which is a draining force. Mars was in Sagittarius squaring Jupiter, overcoming Jupiter by square. And so Jupiter has not had this kind of calm entry into Pisces. And last week that happened Wednesday. These first several days have been combustive, and there's been, what do I have here? It's a complex exchange between Mars and Jupiter right now. There's highs, that's Jupiter and Pisces, but then there's lows. That's Mars by an overcoming square, forcing Jupiter to contend with martial power. You might think about it as if you're responsible for children, let's say really rambunctious, preteens, or like that 8, 9, 10 age. I mean, those kids can get really excited. It's a cool age because you become conscious, but then you're still like have a vivacity, and you just can run crazy. Maybe even younger too, like in the 3, 4, 5, where kids are just out exploring and going mad in a way for life. They're mad for all the new things they're discovering. That might be Mars and Sagittarius, right? The fiery energy and force of discovery. That energy is, Jupiter in Pisces rules it, so it disposes of it, it's responsible for it. And then that energy is earlier in the zodiac. And so there's this kind of complex exchange where, yes, Jupiter and Pisces, the healing wisdom, the healing waters, the expansive powers of Jupiter, the grief, the sadness, the storms, which I'll go into later, those things are now mixing with this kind of really fiery, expansive, martial force. And so there's highs and lows. This is what astrologers will say when we see blends of malefic and benefics. It's great highs and great lows. You get that now with Jupiter in Pisces. And then you have the south bending, which also intensifies maybe through a draining power. It's like Pisces is the bath, and now the south node's draining that water out, and you've got the spigot on trying to fill it back up. And there's a sense here maybe doing too much work or overwork, particularly with that Mars and Sagittarius. There's just a lot of, what do I have here? Under pressure almost immediately. I think in my original write-up, it's just doing a lot, a lot of activity, and maybe not feeling those results right away, or maybe feeling overworked, especially on the cusp of a holiday season. If you've had social obligations, I know I did, and they were draining. It was great, it was fun, but I mean, I'm kind of someone who likes to stay in routines, and getting back into that, combobulating, and reforming might be part of what this week calls us to do. And there may be still busyness extending in. This Mars-Jupiter square does not perfect until later. Actually, it already perfected, so this is over, but it's by sign. Mars will come into Capricorn. I think the next there will be a sextile that Mars and Jupiter perfect sometime later in the 2022. But it's this sign-based square that will end when Mars enters Capricorn, and I believe that's later in January. Don't have that date up right now. But there's about 3 weeks, I think, of Mars still in Sagittarius, maybe 2.5. And so this is what happens with Jupiter. You've got, even though now this week Jupiter perfects its conjunction with the south bending and begins separating, the node doesn't shift out of Sagittarius until the 18th of January. That is 16 days from where we are now. I think it's the week after that Mars leaves Sagittarius, and so it's not really until the end of January that Jupiter won't have to dispose of Mars and the south node. Now, I want to say this, that the mean south node, some of you guys out there might be wondering, guys, gals, folks, wondering about the mean node versus the true node. I've seen that question come up a lot on Twitter recently. The mean node is a average of the movements. I'm not going to go into all of the mathematics, but it's basically an idealized average, whereas the true node is actually the path of the moon and the path of the sun and where it crosses. And so it's something that's more precise. In astrology, this comes up over and over again, where astrologers will use averaging in terms of their calculations. You see this with Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions. There's a mean conjunction and then a true conjunction. And astrologers will use both. I use both mean and true. And actually with the nodes, I like using both mean and true. The thing about it is the mean node entered Taurus, the mean north node entered Taurus at the end of December. And so we're in that 1 month period where the mean node is already shifted and the true node is still in the previous sign, but it's just a transition phase. And it's not a big deal in my view. They're both operative. The good thing about the nodes is that the eclipses are in the signs that the eclipses happen. So even though the nodes might have this division between mean and true and this kind of unclear exactitude for when they've shifted fully, eclipses are going to either be in one sign or another sign. And so I just think about this as a transition month, and it's completed. The nodal shift, January 18th, where neither node, the mean or the true north node, is still in Gemini. They'll both be in Taurus. And then neither south node, the mean or true, will be in Sagittarius anymore. So just a little segue there and a bit of information there. You can read all about this online. Just go how to calculate the mean node. Enter that into Google and you can read papers on it, people that detail that calculation, if you're curious. Okay, so I want to come back now. So that's this early week with Jupiter, the south node, separating from the south bending, Mars still overcoming Jupiter by sign, and the whole time a waxing moon. That's why I think there's some instability. We'll get to the moon in a second. We're building in a growth phase with this growth energy, this kind of fiery, overpowering growth energy. Let's come back to the weekend. I think this is an important transit here. Venus and the sun join. Venus comes into the heart of the sun, marking the halfway point of the Venus retrograde. We love these as astrologers. We love when Venus comes into the heart of the sun, especially this inferior conjunction, which is the rebirth of the Venus cycle. And I know some astrologers, they use different dates for the start of the Venus cycle. This is the one I pick because of the symbolic nature of a night. So Venus, before it goes retrograde, is in the night sky. Astrologers call this a Matuine, I think is the word, but it basically means a night star. And when that Venus turns and stations retrograde and then starts going retrograde, so it's the night. The night itself is symbolic of an ending of the day, right? You come into night and that's the day is over. And so as a night star, not a morning star, but an evening star Venus, that's what I think is the end of the cycle. When it goes retrograde, then it goes underground for that rebirth phase. Then it gets purified, the inferior conjunction starts the new Venus cycle, and then you'll start seeing it in February. It'll be reborn as a morning star. Morning is new, right? So to me, just how the morning evening star component of these conjunctions are, and then the nature of a retrograde has a rebirth, and then a direct station, it's like, the direct station is the beginning, right? It's starting to move forward again as a morning star. So direct forward movement and morning are both, to me, implicit of, or there's an implication with both of those things of new. So that's why I think this is the beginning of the Venus cycle. It's this heart of the sun moment on Saturday in Capricorn. And it might just be an opportunity. So I have here clarifying the story of Venus retrograde for you in Venusian themes. Again, the Capricorn sector of your chart has been under so much pressure since 2019, really late 2017 when Saturn came there. Then the south, the south node was in Capricorn, and so there was eclipses there. There's just been a lot of activity. And now this Venus Cazimi, I think, can be a symbolic maybe refresh. Or it's nice to have a Venus cycle being reborn there. What's Venus? Pleasures, love, enjoyment, music, art, connection, relations, people that we connect with. And so it's a nice kind of purification. I think the Capricorn sector with this symbolic rebirth can be, just like, again, purified with the benefic planet Venus, where pleasures maybe can emerge in Capricorn. Capricorn itself and Saturn often aren't what we think about as pleasurable energies, but it can be. I mean, like I was just saying, I derive a lot of effort out of work. Remember I said earlier, one day at a time makes a year of 365 or 366 days. There can kind of be a pleasure in checking off those boxes every day. Yes, I hit my marks, I hit my goals. And that kind of a workmanlike approach to production or pleasures, there can be great highs, because if you put in, the 30 days to write the book or something like this, and then you get that final box that you open from the editor and you see the book, that can be a kind of pleasure that you'll never access without the workmanlike processes. That might be a way to think about this rebirth of Venus here in Capricorn, the kind of serious and structured approaches to what feels good, and even the delayed payouts to pleasure. You might want to contemplate those this Sunday. So, and then the other thing, Pluto will move out of Capricorn. I think it's 2024 when it finally leaves for good, at the end of 2023 or early 2024. And that's not during this Venus cycle, but it's still somewhat close. And so Capricorn will be totally freeing up here in a couple of years. there will be a pocket there where you don't have any intense activation for other than Mars coming through, and then I think the nodes will come back. That an inverse node will return later in this decade. All right, let me come back here. I'm getting lost, getting too far ahead, and these connections that just emerge as you talk. And so I'm just going to kind of refresh here, reframe. Let's go to see what the moon's doing. I'm just going to run through this somewhat fast. I'll try here. We start the week with the Capricorn moon. That's the exiled moon in Capricorn. It was a really nice new moon for the Jupiter sextile, Venus being co-present. I think we can capture some of that, those aspects here with the Capricorn moon. But it's still the exiled place of the moon, where the moon is maybe not fully comfortable. That ends late in the evening on the 3rd of January, right before we get into Tuesday here in Central Europe. Then we get the Aquarius moon with Saturn. This Aquarius moon is a rough one. There will be a moment on late Tuesday, early Wednesday in Central Europe when the moon will be enclosed between Mars and Saturn, mid-transit here in Aquarius. And these fixed moons, they're just rough. They've been rough. You deal with Saturn. That's a rougher energy. I mean, you know, it's like getting cold water poured on your face, and you welcome to the day. You got to confront it. And there's things that can be confrontational. There may be intensities in the news. I've seen that over and over again in 2021 when the moon hit these fixed signs, particularly when Mars was there, also in fixed signs, where you would have big news stories that were kind of scary and anxiety-inducing. If you let them, you know, sometimes it's good to ground. But the news, in a way, the nature of it is sometimes to induce anxiety or just to have a crisis or a fever pitch that gets turned up. That's how news operates. That's how they sell advertising, you know. So let me come back here. Pisces moon with Jupiter and square Mars. So this, I like, my transit of the week options were this Pisces moon or this Aries moon. And the thing about the Pisces moon is you get this Mars square, this Mars in Sagittarius. So everything I was describing earlier about the intensifications and the energy and the overwhelm of this waxing moon phase, all of this week, you've got a growth of energy. You've got Jupiter and Mars dynamically activating this moon. I think this is an overwhelming week potentially with energy here, particularly on, what is this, Thursday, early in the morning when the moon enters Pisces, and then that ends on Saturday early in the morning when the moon enters Aries. And so I didn't go with that. I like this moon as the first moon with Pisces while Jupiter's in Pisces. I think earlier in the degrees, maybe we can escape some of the overwhelm, but I do think this could kind of be a hot energy and an energy of movement. Remember, mutable signs are signs of change and movement and activity. They are signs of being overwhelmed, signs of having to jump back and forth, and wow, this too much is happening. Mars is in Sagittarius, Jupiter is in Pisces, and there's this kind of doubling up of these planets of power and force being in mutable signs of change. That's where this comes from, this delineation, partially. And so yeah, I think this young waxing phase here. Oh, then the Aries moon ruled by Mars and receives that. Mars in Sagittarius makes a trine there to the moon instead of the square. And you know, we're going to dive into that chart because I think there's reasons to pick it over the Jupiter chart, but it's pretty close. So I generally try to avoid hard aspects with Mars. That's a primary concern for me. The moon being by sign in a hard aspect with Mars is something I really am hesitant to choose as the best energy of the week. So what did I close out here with? Pile-ups in Aquarius and Pisces. That happens in the first part of the year. We get an Aquarius pile-up. Mars and Saturn will meet in Aquarius. They'll perfect a conjunction in March, I believe is when that perfects in Aquarius. Maybe it's even early April, but it's like late March, early April. There will be other pile-ups there. Venus, Mars, and Saturn will all be in Aquarius in March, at parts of March. And so there is this big pile-up in Aquarius, and then there is a pile-up in Pisces shortly after that. And so this Aquarius-Pisces sign, these two signs play a big role this spring. The moon waxes through them this week, triggering those things, front-running things that may be building for that March-April story. This is going to be, every time the moon comes through here, this is what I'm thinking about, because these transits in March and April are so important for this year's astrology that this is why we like the moon as an activator and as a front runner. And the moon, according to Vedic Phalans, is foreknowledge. This is why, because it's hitting all of those degrees all the time, and it gives us activation astrologically before big transits get activated that are coming up. So I love the moon as a planet of foreknowledge, just in terms of how it functions in this way. And, this is the last thing I want to say here, that with the Aquarius and then Pisces, Saturn themes are running simultaneous to Jupiter themes. That's what we get now with a strong Saturn and a strong Jupiter. You're going to have moments where it's heavy restrictions and heavy coolness and heavy kind of an industry that's required from Saturn, right? That doesn't go away at all in 2022. And then yet you have this powerful Jupiter all year. And so there will be, they both are cooperative. And this is what I was going back in the introduction. Just because Jupiter's powerful doesn't mean we get rid of malefic planets and difficult energy. Mars and Saturn are always in every chart. So even if you have the best Jupiter and the best Venus, you still have Mars and Saturn operating, doing things in a chart. And this can begin to kind of explain the problem, the philosophical problem. Why do good transits sometimes result in bad things? Well, you always have Mars and Saturn. You don't eliminate those. You don't eviscerate Mars and Saturn. So this is a big theme of all of 2022, both a strong Jupiter and a strong Saturn. And I expect more highs and lows and more ups and downs. But the good thing is that we have this Jupiter, which hopefully can take us higher. We have a Jupiter-Saturn cycle expand in its expansion phase where we can move into new things and deal with the lows, right? We have support to deal with the lows with these strong benefics, particularly Jupiter Pisces here. So, okay, let's move. That's the moon this week, and I'm going to cover these charts. Let's just blow through this. Let's move through this. We've got on the 3rd, this is Monday, at 1 p.m. or 12:39 p.m. This is the one chart I wanted to go into that's not the transit of the week. It's this Jupiter at the south bending. So on my software doesn't give us a separate thing for the south bending. It doesn't get a separate symbol, though that would be interesting. Maybe we can have people can come up with that. Maybe it would be the horseshoe sign of the nodes, and then you could put a line through it like they do with the elements. You have the triangle and then the upside down triangle, but then there's a line through those two triangles, and that's how you get the 4 elements. Maybe I'll send that out to my friend Hugh Tran, who does symbol design. I'll probably send that to him later today. I hope I remember. So, but you see here, Jupiter's right at the south bending here, midday Monday, and it's just what I talked about. I just wanted to pull the chart up. You can see here you've got Jupiter receiving an overcoming square from Mars. It's right exact at the south bending. It's with Neptune, and a lot of modern astrologers just go to Twitter, if you have a Twitter account. Type in Neptune is a malefic. You might get like 1,000 retweets. People really resonate with the idea that Neptune's a malefic energy. It's a common sense of Neptune amongst modern astrologers. I tend to go with Neptune being more of a benefic in a way. I really don't assign malefic and benefic to anything other than Venus, Jupiter, benefic, Mars, and Saturn malefic. I think it's part of the ancient system of how we utilize the 7 traditional planets. And I just would say that there's parts of Neptune that I find very auspicious. There's spiritual expansion, there's release into the unknown, there is kind of letting go of ego, letting go of the ideas we think are true, and this kind of diffuse into this greater oneness. I find that to be awesome. Maybe some people are scared of it, and it can be scary to like go into that dark closet where the unknown, back to this theme of stepping into the unknown. You find, what did D.H. Lawrence say? You step over, you jump out, jump off the cliff, and you land. You're going to land somewhere. That's what you discover. And that's the thing about Neptune. It might feel scary, but once you decide to release, you actually fall and land. And so you will come back into often a new place, a reformulated selfhood. That's what shamanic initiation is. A lot of these shamanic initiations, if you've done psychedelics, sometimes you're confronting death as a key component of the psychedelic experience. And it does break open the self in ways that are transformative. And I find empathy is the ultimate result, because one is able to empathize with those deep fears once you've confronted them yourself. That's the power of Neptune, both maybe the highs and the lows. Let me come back here. I didn't even mean to talk about Neptune, but I'm glad I did. This Jupiter co-presence with Neptune, with the south bending, and then square Mars. This defines The Neptune-Jupiter co-presence is the whole of the transit, but there's Mars, which will end in 3 weeks, and then the south bending moves out in 2 weeks. It clears up Sagittarius and means that Jupiter has a little bit of more freedom to do the Jupiter activity, you know, religious beneficence, even material gain. There's all these things that Jupiter signifies: joy, hope, vision, you know, healing, that I think we'll be able to deepen more into later in this 2022, first part of 2022. But you can see this chart here. Astrology is always a mix of energies. Jupiter and Pisces square Mars. It's too much activity and power. It can feel overwhelming. I've covered that already plenty in this talk. This is the thing I wanted to share about Rudyard, Dane Rudyard, the genius wordsmith. His writing is some of the most poetic, profound, and symbolically rich. Just on the signs, I love his book, The Pulse of Life. He'll just go through the signs, and he's this rich symbolic, you know, wordplay, and he calls to mind these metaphor. For Pisces, Rudyard talks about storms, destructive storms, storms that destroy what Saturn set up, and it's the final sign of the zodiac before the Aries rebirth. And this can be some of the discomfort. I talked about this in the last few videos, that Pisces is not just the easy energy, it's an uncomfortable energy because you're having to see damage. And I think the Rudyard metaphor fits with that these are mutable water signs ruled by the expansive Jupiter. You can think about being in a storm. You don't know what's going to happen. You may have to stay in a closet or under a mattress if you're like where I'm from, where tornadoes hit. They're in Texas. You know, we were taught that as a young person, how to weather a tornado. You get taught that very young. But every region has their own version of big storms. You know, typhoons in Asia, hurricanes in, you know, the southern and eastern United States. Storms are scary. They change. They destroy. You know, but maybe there's a sense of the cleansing and the truth of that can bring, and how those can ultimately be beneficial in a way. And maybe it's just some of the silver lining or bright side mentality that this Jupiter and Pisces forces us into. It's like bad shit's going to happen, but we get the chance to dig deeper into meaning of life. What is life for? Am I my possessions? Am I my body? And, you know, the kind of destructive power of a storm will force us to dig deep to survive, but then to thrive and then to rebuild. So maybe that's a little bit here. I just think this chart, it's the Pisces metaphors that Rudyard uses as the destructive Pisces, the mutable, changeable Pisces, but it's combined in this particular chart here. This week on Monday, midday, Jupiter's right at the south bending, square the nodes, and being overcome by Mars and Sagittarius. It does kind of corrupt, might be the wrong word, but it does make this Jupiter ride here for these first few weeks a little combustive, a little, you know, wavy, in the sense of, you know, these big waves. I saw that movie Inception, that scene. I just clicked on a video on YouTube. I love this scene though. They're out on a planet and that big wave comes. Remember that scene? Not Inception. This is the other Christopher Nolan movie where Matthew McConaughey goes to the stars. Boy, I can't think of the name of that film right now. It's slipping my mind, which is too bad because it's just like a short name. It's a clear name. But there's this movie that Matthew McConaughey plays, the space rocket, the space guy. Shoot, I'm gonna look it up. My last video, I missed Julian and Gregorian. Of course, Julian is Julius Caesar, so that's the one that comes first. And I was like, you know, I don't know this, and someone corrected me in the comments. Thanks for doing that, but I don't want to be embarrassed. I know this movie, Nolan film, stars, space. Let's see if this Google search gets it up here. Nolan film, stars, space. Come on, what's going on? All right, I'm delaying. My internet is not, there it is. So Christopher Nolan films in order. I know I'm delaying here, and I hate to be delaying this talk like this, but again, it's like, if I don't do it, then someone's gonna mention it and I'm gonna feel. This is like a huge movie. Everybody knows about this movie, and I can't think of the name right now. Okay, my internet's running a little bit slow. Where is this movie, Interstellar. Sorry about that, I just wasted a minute of the video. Interstellar, it's the movie Interstellar. So let's move. But there's a scene in Interstellar with the waves, and they become destructive, and they're running from those waves, actually. And that might be a sense of what this Jupiter and Pisces is about. It's like big waves. You may have to be running and shifting and changing and activated, but especially with Mars and Sagittarius making that square. That's for about the next 3 weeks, and we're already in that. So let's shift to the next chart. This is the transit of the week. This happens on Saturday, is what I've picked here. It's about midday, 5 p.m. in Central Europe. You've got the moon in Aries, and it's the early degrees of Aries which are important for this transit of the week, because the Egyptian terms of Jupiter, and then the Egyptian terms of Venus, the first 12 degrees are Venus and Jupiter Egyptian terms. And what you get in this chart, so first of all, Mars is making a fire trine and it's being received by Mars. Is it the ideal place to have the ruler of the moon, Mars and Sagittarius? No, it's not. But the other two rulers, if you get a Jupiter or Venus ruled moon, you get Jupiter strong in Pisces, so you capture that Jupiter in Pisces, but you get Venus in the heart of the sun. You get the Venus Cazimi moment here, when the moon is moving through the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. There's 5 degrees of Venuses in Aries that you can capture a Venus ruled in the heart of the sun. A moon that's ruled by Venus while Venus is there in the heart of the sun. I just like this better. I'd rather contend with this benefic energy, if you can capture it via the Egyptian terms, and not have the Mars square. That's just the choice I made when I was preparing this. So yeah, look, this is the waxing fire trine. I think we can start stepping into some of this dynamic activity here. When you have Mars in a trine aspect, it's a flow and a supportive flow from Mars. And so maybe all of this Sagittarian and Piscean dynamic changeable activity during this waxing phase, maybe by this weekend we're channeling it here with some productive Aryan breaking out activity. And you know, this is a transit that I think of all the transits this week with the waxing moon, it's one that's most supportive of, it's like you ride a horse, they go crazy, but you learn how to ride. And you can contain with that horse, or the tarot card, lust or strength, where you're containing that lion. This feels to be, for me, to be very much a containing the power and force of Mars and Jupiter here on the weekend, the moon in the early degrees. That is the transit of the weekend. It's hit the ground running 2022. That's how I'm thinking about this next weekend. We're already here, we're already hitting the ground running, but maybe this is some more deliberate maneuvering that's more auspiciously supported by the sky. And the last thing I want to look at, I know I always do 2 charts lately, but I want to just throw this chart in because this is that exact moment of the Venus Cazimi here on Sunday, 1 a.m. in Central Europe. So it's Saturday if you're in America, or later Sunday if you're down under. But this fixed star I think is important. It's called Shallayak. The fixed star Shallayak in the Lyra constellation. I love the Lyra constellation because it's of the nature of Mercury and Venus. You read about it and it's about music, Orpheus, the kind of musical and artistic components of the mythological tradition. So anytime I see Lyra, I like to just mention it. And it underscores the themes of Venus, which is music and art and beauty, that it's purified in the heart of the sun, and that it's right next to this fixed star, which is the sweet, beautiful music and art that can come. And just, I mean, you might think about art as life. Beauty is life. I mean, I know that, like, this just comes up for me, wow. My 4th house of family is Capricorn. And I remember when my grandfather died. This was several years ago, over a decade now. And on his deathbed, he was an awesome guy, really, really cool dude. And on his deathbed, literally the moments that he was dying, they were playing the Ave Maria, and we were holding hands in a circle around him, singing the Ave Maria just as he passed. It was literally the moments that he left his body. And just how beautiful that was to bring music and the power of Venus and the love of Venus and the connectivity of Venus, using the music to sort of connect as he made his great transition. I'll never forget it. I'll just never forget it. I mean, what an honor to go out that way, you know. So anyhow, this is the kind of stuff I think about. You know, Capricorn's a heavy energy. Capricorn and Saturn can signify death. But with Venus and Saturn blending here, it's this kind of stuff where maybe there's serious moments here, but you can use music to beautify and kind of really make the ritual or make that moment, the spirituality of the moment. Music is a doorway into the spirits. And just listen to, you know, anybody really, I mean, but like the rock and roll, and they say these kids are gyrating their hips, that's all Venus, right? But then you can put on, you know, Beethoven and the weeping when you hear those really beautiful, the beautiful music. I use, now you probably noticed, the Brahms 4th Symphony. That's my theme music now. I just love it. And that one can bring me to tears sometimes. It's like so beautiful and so deep at the same time. Venus, Saturn. So, okay, that's the weekly astrology. Let's pull a weekly tarot card. And let's just check out what's going to go down, add another symbol here in this week. So where are we? I'm going to pull it, and here we go. It's the number 1. We know what card that is. That is a really cool card. So I call it nothing, but it's the Fool. This is the Fool. What a week to have the Fool. Anytime you get the Fool, it's very, I see it as a signal from the gods that it is time to kind of clean away and clear away and get a fresh start. Really letting go of expectations. And it seems like a theme of this talk has been the unknown with Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, all of the mutable energy, all of the kind of fiery activity that mutables are engaged with right now. We have to let go and step into the unknown. Even the difficult stuff that's happened is if you've had destruction going on, there's a sense of now the newness and freshness of the unknown. That's what the Fool card is. That's what the Nothing card is. And it's the air element. Air is hard to capture, right? It's hard to materialize. It's there, but you can't see it. It's moving. You can feel it. And this is a beautiful, beautiful card, like stepping into that portal. You can see it in this image. It's just like a portal that's opening, and we kind of choose to step in and step through that unknown. And that's what I would just say, the unknowns of 2022, the unknowns of what it's going to be like to have Jupiter in Pisces and not in Saturn ruled signs, the unknowns of a new eclipse cycle coming this year, the unknowns of just life itself, you know. And so, you know, this to me is an auspicious kind of clearing and cleansing of what we think we know. Try to let that go a little bit and get into 2022 and get excited about the potential and possibilities. That's the other thing about this card, the potentiality. The less we project on, the more potential there is. So that is the weekly astrology. I'll leave the weekly tarot here. Have a great week. This is S.J. Anderson. Thank you for being here and thank you for coming to my channel. You can support me by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and schedule an astrology reading, or you can support my Patreon. Helps keep these videos going. Have an awesome day. Talk soon.